Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. I thought we had the perfect marriage. We laughed, we dreamed together, we made plans for the future. People envied us. I believed he was the love of my life, the man I would grow old with. He was my world. But then, everything started to shift. It was subtle at first, a late night at the office, a few too many business trips. I chalked it up to the stress of his job, or maybe just needing some space. But something nagged at me, a feeling I couldn't ignore. I started noticing things that didn't make sense. His phone always buzzing at odd hours, his sudden secrecy with his social media, his distant demeanor when he came home. I ignored it, convincing myself I was overthinking. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. One evening, he left his phone unattended. Normally, I would never snoop. I trusted him, right? But curiosity got the best of me. I picked up his phone, my hands shaking with nervous anticipation. As soon as I unlocked it, I saw the messages. They weren't from work colleagues or friends, but from someone named Daniel. My heart sank. "I miss you," one read, followed by a heart emoji. There were dozens of messages, flirty, intimate, longing. I scrolled further, and what I found crushed me. They had been seeing each other for months. My husband had been hiding this whole other relationship. Not only had he been unfaithful, but he had been living a double life. How could he have done this to me? How could he have lied to my face every day? I had to know more. I scrolled through the entire conversation, feeling my stomach twist in knots. They had planned weekend getaways, secret dates, and nights spent together. I couldn't believe my eyes. I thought about the late nights he had come home late, always claiming he was working or had important meetings. He had been with him. All along, I had been in the dark, a fool, while my husband shared his life, his body, with another man. I felt a wave of betrayal wash over me. How had I missed this? How had I not noticed the signs? And worse, how had he looked me in the eye every day, kissed me, made love to me, knowing the entire time that his heart and his body belonged to someone else? I couldn't breathe. I was shaking, my world crumbling around me. He had been pretending for years. Our entire marriage a lie. The man I thought I knew, my best friend, my partner, was someone else entirely. How could he have lived this secret life behind my back? How could he have betrayed me in such a profound way? The pain was unbearable, but I had to confront him. I couldn't live with the unknown, the deceit any longer. I knew I had to face the truth, no matter how much it would hurt. I waited for him to come home, my mind racing with questions. What would I say? How could I confront him about this? My emotions were a tangled mess of anger, hurt, disbelief, and confusion. But above all, I was determined to get answers. When he walked through the door that evening, I didn't waste any time. I held up his phone, the evidence clear in my hand. His face went pale as he saw the messages, the proof of his betrayal staring back at him. He tried to talk his way out of it, but I wasn't interested in his lies anymore. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. He knew I knew. The truth had been laid bare. He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I demanded answers, my voice shaking with emotion. "What is this, Jason? Who is Daniel?" He finally sighed and admitted it. He had been having an affair with Daniel for years. The man I loved had been secretly seeing another man all along. I felt as if the ground had shifted beneath me. This wasn't just an affair. It was a whole life he had been living behind my back. A life I never knew existed. He sat down, running his hands through his hair. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice strained with guilt. "I never meant to hurt you. I love you, but I love him too." The words hit me like a punch in the gut. He loved me, but he loved him too. The audacity, the selfishness. How could he possibly expect me to understand that? "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief. "Why did you lie to me for so long? Why didn't you just be honest?" He shook his head, his eyes filled with regret. "I didn't want to lose you," he said quietly. "I didn't know how to tell you the truth. I never wanted to hurt you, but that was the problem, wasn't it?" He thought he could keep both of us, his wife and his lover, hidden away in separate worlds. He thought I wouldn't find out, but I did. And now, everything had changed. The conversation was a blur after that. I couldn't process the weight of his words. He loved me, but he loved him too. And that was supposed to make sense? I felt numb. I had always suspected something was off, but I never imagined it would be like this. Never in my wildest dreams did I think my husband would betray me with another man. The confusion and hurt were overwhelming. And yet, somehow, I didn't feel angry, at least not yet. What I felt most was grief. I was grieving the marriage I thought I had, the man I thought I knew, the life I thought we were building. He had taken it all and twisted it into something unrecognizable. I looked at him, and I barely recognized him anymore. This man, this stranger sitting in front of me, wasn't the person I had spent years loving. He wasn't the man I had married. He was someone else. I never wanted this to happen, he said again, his voice breaking. I swear, I didn't plan for it to go this far. But that was the thing, wasn't it? He had planned it. He had chosen to keep two lives running parallel to each other. He had made the conscious decision to deceive me, to hide his truth from me, for all this time. I wasn't angry that he was gay. I could never be angry about that. I was angry that he had lied to me, that he had taken my trust and thrown it away. He could have been honest. He could have been open. But instead, he had hidden behind lies and excuses, and for what? So he could keep both of us in the dark, both of us unaware of the truth. As the days passed, the weight of the situation grew heavier. I couldn't look at him without feeling betrayed. Every moment we had shared, every laugh, every touch, every word, now felt tainted. How had I been so blind? How had I missed all the signs? It was like I had been living in a fog, unaware of the storm raging just beneath the surface. He tried to explain, to apologize, to make me understand. But there was nothing he could say that would fix this. Nothing that could make me forget the years of deception. The worst part was knowing that the man I thought I loved had never been fully mine. He had always belonged to someone else. He had been sharing himself with Daniel, hiding his love, his truth, from me. I wasn't just his wife. I was his cover, his disguise. And that thought made my stomach turn. That night, after hours of talking, crying, and attempting to make sense of everything, I knew I had to make a choice. Could I forgive him? Could I live with this betrayal? The man I thought I knew had vanished, replaced by a stranger who had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible. There was no going back to who we had been. He had broken something deep inside me, and I didn't know if it could ever be fixed. I thought about the future. Could I ever trust him again? Could I live in a marriage built on lies, even if he promised to change? The answer was clear. I couldn't. The love we had wasn't real. It was built on deception. It was a foundation of sand, and the tide had come in and swept it all away. I decided to take some time away from him. I needed space, distance, to clear my mind and try to understand who I was now in this broken marriage. I moved into a spare room, and the silence between us was deafening. For the first time, I didn't know how to look at him. He would apologize constantly, telling me how sorry he was, how much he regretted everything. But his apologies felt hollow. How could they not? His words couldn't undo the years of lies. His actions had already spoken louder than anything he could say. There were moments when I almost felt guilty for needing time to think, but then I remembered all the years he had taken from me, and the guilt faded. I deserved peace. I deserved the truth. I deserved a life without secrets. Days turned into weeks, and yet the weight of what he had done hung over me. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of emotions, anger, confusion, betrayal, but underneath it all, there was a deep sadness. I missed the man I had married. I missed the person I thought he was. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't miss him as much as I missed the idea of him. I had been living a lie. We both had. And now I had to decide whether I could forgive him, or if it was even worth trying. He still hadn't told me everything. I knew there were pieces of the story that were missing, things he was still hiding. I needed to know everything before I could make any decision about our future. But was I ready to hear more? I wasn't sure. One evening, as I sat quietly in the living room, he came to me, his face pale, his eyes pleading. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. My heart skipped a beat. I knew, deep down, that what he was about to say would change everything. I nodded, trying to steady my breathing, as I braced myself for whatever truth he was about to reveal. I never meant to hurt you, he started, his hands trembling. But, Daniel and we've been planning a future together. I want to be with him. It's not just a fling. It's real. My world stopped spinning for a moment. He wanted to be with him? He was choosing Daniel over me? The words stung more than I could have imagined. The betrayal wasn't just in the lies. It was in his decision to leave me for someone else. He had made his choice, and I was no longer it. I felt like I was suffocating. He tried to explain, but I couldn't focus on his words. All I could hear were the echoes of the life we had built, now shattered into a million pieces. His admission hit me like a tidal wave. I had always suspected something was wrong, but never in a million years did I think it would come to this. He had been living with two hearts, two loves, and now he was ready to give one of them up. But it wasn't me. I was the wife. I was the one who had been faithful, who had stood by him through everything. And yet, in the end, it wasn't enough. My heart ached as the weight of reality hit me. He didn't want to be with me anymore. He had chosen a different life, a different future. I wasn't part of it. I stood up, my legs shaky, and walked away from him. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay in the same room as him anymore. I felt like I was suffocating, drowning in the realization that everything I thought I knew had been a lie. I went to the kitchen and opened the window, letting the cold air hit my face, hoping it would clear my head. The pain was unbearable. He was leaving me for another man. How had it come to this? I had loved him with everything I had. I had given him my heart, my trust, my future, and he had given it all to someone else. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I couldn't let them fall, not yet. I needed to be strong, to figure out what came next. But how do you move on from something like this? The next few days were a blur. I hardly left the house, lost in my thoughts, trying to make sense of everything. I thought about all the signs I had missed, those small, subtle things that, in hindsight, were glaringly obvious. The late nights, the strange behavior, the distant look in his eyes. How could I have been so blind? The sadness was overwhelming. I had always prided myself on being a good judge of character, on seeing through people's lies. But this was different. He had fooled me completely. I realized then that I couldn't blame myself for not knowing. He had been so good at hiding it. He had played the role of the perfect husband, the loving partner, the man I thought I knew. And I had fallen for it. As I processed everything, I realized something important. I deserved better than this. I deserved someone who was honest, who didn't deceive me, who didn't pretend to be someone he wasn't just to keep me around. I deserved someone who loved me for who I truly was, not someone who hid their true self for fear of hurting me. It wasn't just the affair that hurt. It was the deception, the lies, the years of pretending. He had thought he could have it all. He had thought he could keep his wife and his lover without consequences. But he was wrong. And now, I had to face the painful truth. I couldn't keep living in this lie. I needed to let go. I made the decision to leave. It was hard, harder than anything I had ever done in my life. The house we had shared, the life we had built, it all felt like a distant memory now. I packed my things, unsure of where I was going, but certain of one thing. I couldn't stay in this place any longer. I couldn't stay with him. It felt like my whole world was unraveling, but deep down, I knew it was the right decision. I needed to rebuild, to rediscover who I was without him, without the lies. It was time to find my own path again. The life I had envisioned for myself, the future I had dreamed of, was no longer possible with him. He had stolen that from me, but I would find a new way forward. The moment I walked out of that door, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Relief, because I was finally free from the shackles of betrayal. Sorrow, because I had to say goodbye to the man I once loved, the man I thought I knew. But deep inside, I knew I would heal. It would take time, and there would be days when the pain would feel unbearable, but I knew I had made the right choice. I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to let his lies break me. I would rebuild my life, piece by piece, until I could stand on my own again, stronger than ever. It wasn't going to be easy, but I had my strength, and that was all I needed. I didn't know what the future held, But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. I had taken back my life. And no matter how painful the journey would be, I was ready to face it. I didn't need him. I had been enough all along. I just needed to remember that. The days that followed were filled with a storm of emotions. The initial relief of leaving him behind began to fade, and all I could feel was an overwhelming sense of loneliness. I had spent so many years building my identity around him, and now I had to rebuild everything from scratch. I spent hours talking to friends who had no idea what I had been going through. It was strange. When I was with him, I felt like I had the perfect life, but now it all felt like a lie. How could I have been so blind? How could I have allowed him to deceive me for so long? The thoughts kept swirling in my mind, and I couldn't help but replay everything in my head, from the very beginning to the moment I walked out the door. But there was no going back. The betrayal had changed everything. It was impossible to undo what had already been done, and so I moved forward, one step at a time. I knew the hardest part was going to be the silence. I missed the conversations we used to have, the way he would talk about our future, about dreams we were going to chase together. But those dreams had been shattered. It was so difficult to come to terms with the fact that all of it had been a facade. There were moments when I wondered if I could ever trust anyone again, if I could ever let myself love fully again. Could I ever allow myself to believe in someone after everything he had done? But as I sat in the quiet of my apartment, I realized something important. I couldn't let this define me. I couldn't let this broken marriage become my life's story. I still had so much to offer the world. I still had a future waiting for me, one that wasn't tainted by his lies. And so, I started small, one day at a time, one decision at a time. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, I received a message from him. It was brief, just a few lines saying how much he missed me and how sorry he was. He apologized again, but the words felt empty. They no longer held the weight they used to. I had heard the same things over and over, and every time, they had meant nothing. He had made his choice, and now he had to live with it. I debated whether I should reply, but I knew deep down that there was nothing left to say. What good would it do? If anything, it would only open old wounds. I had to protect myself from falling into the same trap again. He had hurt me once, and I couldn't let him do it again. I wasn't the same person I had been before. I was stronger, more aware of my worth. I deserved honesty, love, and respect, and he had none of that to offer. The next few months were a blur of self-reflection and healing. I spent time with friends who supported me, who helped me rediscover the woman I used to be before him. I took up new hobbies, traveled to places I had always wanted to see, and slowly started rebuilding my life. It wasn't easy, but I was determined. I began to understand that the pain would always be a part of me, but it didn't have to control me. I could live a fulfilling life without him. I could be happy on my own. It was hard at first. There were nights when I would cry myself to sleep, missing the life I thought I had, wishing things had turned out differently. But as the weeks passed, the tears became less frequent. I was rediscovering who I was, and with each day, I grew stronger. Slowly, I felt a sense of peace return to my life. I wasn't broken. I was healing. A few months later, I bumped into Daniel, the man my husband had left me for. I wasn't sure how I would react, but as soon as I saw him, I felt a strange sense of calm. I hadn't expected to feel anything but anger and bitterness, but instead, I felt indifferent. It was like meeting someone who had once been part of your life, but was now just a distant memory. He looked nervous, like he wasn't sure how to approach me. I didn't know what to say, but I knew that whatever I felt, I had to be the bigger person. "How's he doing?" I asked, surprising myself with how calm my voice sounded. Daniel hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "He's happy," he said, and in that moment, I realized that I didn't need any more answers. I didn't need to know the details of their relationship. I had moved on. The anger was gone. All that was left was acceptance. As the weeks went by, I started to feel more like myself again. I wasn't sure if I would ever truly forgive my ex-husband for what he had done, but I had come to terms with it. The pain was fading, and with it, the bitterness. I no longer saw him as the man who had betrayed me. Instead, I saw him for what he was, someone who had made his choices, someone who had taken me for granted. I couldn't change that, and I didn't want to anymore. I had let go of the anger, and in doing so, I had freed myself. I was no longer consumed by thoughts of him, by the hurt he had caused me. I had found my own happiness. I knew that moving forward, I would never allow anyone to have that much power over me again. My happiness, my peace, was something only I could control, and I wasn't about to give that up. Eventually, I decided it was time to leave the city, to put even more distance between myself and the life I had once known. I found a small cottage by the sea, a place that felt peaceful and far removed from the chaos of the past. It was exactly what I needed: quiet, serene, and full of possibilities. I spent my days walking along the beach, collecting seashells, and just breathing in the fresh air. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one that was mine to write. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. There were days when I still thought about him, when I remembered the man I had married and the life we had shared. But those memories no longer held the same weight. They were part of my past, and I had let them go. I was learning to embrace the present, to savor each moment without fear of what might happen next. It wasn't long before I met someone new. His name was James, and he was kind, patient, and understanding. He didn't rush things, and he never pressured me. He let me take things at my own pace, and slowly, I began to trust again. The relationship wasn't without its challenges, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was building something real. It was different from what I had with my ex-husband. There were no secrets, no lies. It was open, honest, and full of potential. I knew it was too soon to say if this was the one, but for the first time, I allowed myself to believe in the possibility of a future with someone. The scars from my past were still there, but they no longer defined me. I had healed, and I was ready to embrace the next chapter of my life, whatever it may hold. James and I spent more time together, and every day I grew more comfortable in his presence. He was nothing like my ex-husband. Where my ex had been secretive and manipulative, James was open and honest. We talked about everything: our pasts, our hopes, our dreams, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could truly be myself. I didn't have to pretend, didn't have to keep up any facades. It was refreshing, like a breath of fresh air. As our relationship grew, I began to heal in ways I hadn't expected. Every laugh, every shared moment felt like a piece of my broken heart being put back together. James never pushed me, never tried to rush anything. He let me go at my own pace, and that patience was exactly what I needed. I knew that I wasn't fully healed yet, but I was getting closer with every day that passed. One evening, James took me out to a quiet restaurant by the lake. It was a simple date, but the atmosphere was perfect: soft music, candlelight, and the sound of water lapping gently at the shore. As we sat there, enjoying our meal, James reached across the table and took my hand in his. His eyes were warm, full of understanding. "I know you're still healing," he said softly, "and I'm not rushing you, but I want you to know I'm here for you, no matter what." I felt a lump in my throat as his words sank in. It had been so long since anyone had shown me that kind of love, genuine, patient love. I had been so used to deception, to living in fear of betrayal, but now I was learning to trust again. Slowly, cautiously, but surely. His hand in mine felt like a promise that I could start over, that there was still hope for me in love. Despite how far I had come in my healing process, there were still moments of doubt. There were days when I would catch myself thinking of my ex-husband and wondering if I had made the right decision. Did I leave too soon? Was I too quick to end everything? But then I would remember the lies, the secrecy, and the betrayal. I didn't deserve that. No one did. I had built my life around a man who never really saw me, and I had to remind myself that walking away had been the best decision I could have made. Every time those doubts crept in, I would take a deep breath and ground myself in the present. I had a future now, a future I was building with someone who truly cared about me. I wasn't just healing from a broken marriage, I was learning to thrive again. One day, as I was sorting through some old things in my closet, I found a box of photos from my time with my ex-husband. There were pictures of us on vacations, at family gatherings, and celebrating milestones in our relationship. As I looked through them, I was flooded with memories of a time when I truly believed everything was perfect. It was bittersweet. Those were happy moments, but now they felt like a different lifetime. I had loved him with everything I had, but the man I had loved no longer existed. The man I had married had been replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I let out a long sigh, a mix of sadness and relief. It was time to let go of those memories. They didn't define me anymore. I carefully packed the photos away, closed the box, and placed it in the back of my closet. It was time to move forward, not backward. Months passed, and my relationship with James continued to grow stronger. We started making plans for the future, talking about trips we wanted to take, places we wanted to see, and even what kind of home we might want someday. It felt surreal, in a way. I had never imagined I would be in a relationship like this after everything I had been through. But here I was, building a life with someone who respected me, who valued me for who I was. The wounds from my past hadn't completely healed, but they were fading, replaced by new memories, new experiences. I had learned that love didn't have to come with deception. It didn't have to be something that left you questioning everything. True love was built on trust, honesty, and mutual respect. And I had found that with James. Slowly, but surely, I was learning to trust again. One evening, James and I were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. It was a peaceful moment, and I felt content in a way I hadn't in a long time. We were quiet for a while, simply enjoying the stillness. Then, James turned to me, his expression serious. "I know it's been a journey for you," he said, his voice soft, "but I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I'm in this for the long haul." His words hit me like a wave, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I had been so afraid to let anyone in, to trust again, and yet here was James, offering me his heart with nothing but sincerity. I reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "I know," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "and I'm grateful for you. More than you know." It wasn't easy to admit, but I was finally ready to open my heart to someone again. And I knew I was doing it with the right person. The day finally came when my ex-husband reached out to me once more. It had been months since I had last heard from him, and I wasn't sure how I would feel when I saw his name pop up on my phone. Part of me was angry, part of me was indifferent. But as I read his message, I felt a strange sense of closure. "I just wanted to say that I'm sorry," it read. "I never meant to hurt you. I hope you're doing okay." That was it. No explanation, no deep apology, just a simple statement of regret. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sadness, but it quickly passed. I had spent so much time waiting for an apology that I had forgotten what really mattered. I didn't need his apology to heal. I had already done that on my own. And so, I responded with a simple, "Thank you. I'm doing fine." It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was the closure I needed. And in that moment, I realized that I had truly moved on. As the months went by, I found myself becoming more comfortable in my new life. There were still challenges, moments of doubt, memories that lingered, but they no longer had the power to control me. I had learned to live in the present, to appreciate the good things that were happening now, rather than dwelling on the past. James and I continued to grow together, our bond strengthening with each passing day. We shared our dreams, our fears, and our ambitions. I had never known a love so pure, so honest. It felt like a rebirth, like I was finally becoming the person I had always been meant to be, free from the shadows of the past. I didn't need to look back anymore. The future was waiting for me, and I was ready to embrace it. One afternoon, while we were having coffee on the couch, James turned to me with a playful grin. "I've been thinking," he said, his eyes twinkling. "What if we went on a spontaneous trip, somewhere neither of us has been before, just to get away from everything for a while?" The idea excited me more than I expected. It had been so long since I had done something spontaneous, something just for the sake of adventure. I nodded eagerly. "That sounds perfect." And just like that, we began planning our getaway. It felt freeing to know that I had someone by my side who encouraged me to take risks, to step outside of my comfort zone. I had spent so much of my life trying to control everything, but with James, I was learning to let go, to embrace the unknown. We spent weeks preparing for the trip, deciding on destinations, booking flights, and researching places to visit. The excitement was palpable. It was more than just a vacation. It was a symbol of the new chapter one was beginning. I was leaving behind the shadows of my past and stepping into a future filled with possibilities. As the day of our departure approached, I felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness. I had never been one for impulsive decisions, but with James, it felt like the right thing to do. I packed my bags with a sense of excitement, knowing that this trip would mark the beginning of something even bigger, something more meaningful. We were embarking on a journey not just across the world, but into the future we were building together. The trip was everything I had hoped for and more. We traveled to a small coastal town, far away from the chaos of everyday life. The air was fresh, the scenery breathtaking, and the pace of life slower. It was the perfect escape. We spent our days exploring quaint streets, trying new foods, and soaking up the sun. At night, we would sit on the beach, watching the stars and talking about everything and nothing at the same time. It was during one of these peaceful evenings that I realized how much I had changed. I was no longer the woman trapped in a loveless marriage, constantly questioning my worth. I was now someone who had found happiness, someone who had reclaimed her life. I had finally found peace, and as I looked over at James, I knew that this was just the beginning of our story. As the trip came to an end, I felt a mixture of sadness and gratitude. I didn't want to leave this idyllic place, but I knew that the memories we had created would stay with me forever. We returned home, but something had shifted within me. I felt more confident, more certain of who I was. The fears that had once consumed me no longer had a hold on me. I had been through so much, betrayal, heartbreak, and uncertainty, but now I was stronger for it. I had rebuilt my life from the ground up, and I was proud of the person I had become. James had been a constant source of support, never rushing me, always understanding. I had learned to trust again, to love again, and to believe in myself once more. And for that, I was forever grateful. As we settled back into our daily routine, I found that my relationship with James continued to deepen. We had been through so much together, and every day felt like a testament to our resilience. We supported each other through the ups and downs of life, building a bond that was unshakable. But there was one conversation that had been on my mind for a while, one I knew I needed to have with James. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was important. One evening, after dinner, I turned to him, my heart pounding. "James, there's something I've been thinking about," I said, my voice trembling slightly. He looked at me, his expression soft and attentive. "What's on your mind?" he asked gently. I took a deep breath and began to speak, sharing my fears, my hopes, and everything I had been carrying inside. He listened, offering his understanding and reassurance every step of the way. The conversation went better than I had anticipated. James didn't judge me for my insecurities, and he didn't try to fix everything right away. Instead, he validated my feelings and assured me that I wasn't alone in this. We were partners, equals, and no matter what fears or doubts I had, he was there for me. I realized in that moment that true love wasn't about having everything figured out. It was about being there for each other, supporting one another through the highs and lows. We didn't have to have all the answers, but as long as we were together, we could face anything. I felt a deep sense of relief wash over me as we continued our conversation, knowing that we were building a foundation of trust and love that would last. Months passed, and the quiet contentment I felt with James became the new rhythm of my life. We continued to build memories, both big and small, together. I had always envisioned a life of peace, but now, with James, it was more than just the absence of chaos. It was the presence of love, understanding, and joy. We traveled more, explored different places, and learned more about each other along the way. The sense of adventure that had been awakened in me on our first spontaneous trip never faded. If anything, it grew stronger. I had become someone who no longer feared the unknown, someone who had learned to embrace change and the unpredictability of life. For the first time, I felt fully alive. Every day felt like a gift, and with James by my side, it was impossible not to be thankful. It was during one of our trips that James proposed the idea of moving in together permanently. We had been living in separate apartments, and while we spent a lot of time together, the thought of making our lives even more intertwined excited me. The thought of waking up to him every morning, of sharing our days and nights, of creating a home together, it felt right. We talked about our vision for the future, what we wanted our lives to look like. We both agreed that we wanted a life filled with love, adventure, and support. There were no pretenses between us, no fear of rejection. We could simply be ourselves. And so, after a few discussions, we began planning our future together. Our new home, our shared life. It was exhilarating to think about the next chapter, knowing it would be one we wrote together. Moving in together felt like a natural next step. We found a small but cozy apartment in a neighborhood we both loved. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We spent weekends furnishing it, filling it with things that made us both feel at home. I never thought I'd be so happy to decorate a living space, but there was something magical about building a life with someone who truly understood me. Our apartment became a reflection of both of us, a blend of our tastes and dreams. I had never felt more at peace, knowing that the place I called home was also where my heart felt most at ease. James and I continued to navigate life as partners, tackling everything from mundane tasks to life-altering decisions together. There was no uncertainty anymore, just a steady, growing sense of security and love. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, reflecting on the past few years, I couldn't help but think about everything I had been through. The years of confusion, the heartbreak, the betrayal, all felt like distant memories now. It was hard to believe that the woman I was when I first found out about his secret life was the same woman sitting on the couch beside James. That woman had been lost, unsure of who she was or what she wanted. But now, I was someone stronger, someone who had reclaimed her sense of self, and I owed it all to James. He had shown me what real love looked like. No games, no pretense, just honesty and acceptance. I reached over and squeezed his hand, grateful for everything we had built together. Our relationship had blossomed into something truly beautiful. We had a strong foundation of trust and respect, something I never thought possible after my past experiences. There were still moments of doubt, of course, moments when old insecurities would surface, but they were fleeting. With James, I knew that I was safe. He had proven time and time again that he was my rock, my partner, and my best friend. As we continued to build our life together, we talked about the future, about the things we wanted to accomplish, the places we wanted to visit, and the dreams we hoped to achieve. Our plans felt limitless, and the more we talked about them, the more I realized how lucky I was to have found someone like him. Looking back at everything, I realized how far I had come. I had taken back control of my life, and I had found someone who valued me for who I truly was. The scars from my past were still there, but they didn't define me. They were reminders of my strength, of how far I had come. I had learned to forgive myself for the things I couldn't control and to accept that I was worthy of love, happiness, and peace. My marriage with him might have ended in betrayal, but it also led me to James, a man who loved me with his whole heart, who saw me for who I was and accepted me without hesitation. I no longer lived in the shadow of the past. I had learned to live in the light, and it felt brighter than I could have ever imagined. One night, as we sat on the balcony of our apartment, watching the city lights twinkle below us, I felt a deep sense of contentment. This was the life I had always dreamed of, peaceful, fulfilling, and full of love. There was no longer a need to look over my shoulder or wonder what the future held. With James, I knew that no matter what came our way, we would face it together. We had built something real, something lasting. I leaned against him, my head on his shoulder, and smiled. For the first time in a long while, I felt completely at home, not just in our apartment but in my own skin. And I knew, without a doubt, that the best was yet to come. It's funny how life works. I spent so many years living in a cloud of confusion, uncertainty, and pain. But now, with James, I had found something I never thought I would, a love that was true, steady, and free from pretense. I had learned that real love isn't about perfection or having everything figured out. It's about being there for each other, trusting each other, and accepting one another, flaws and all. I had come to realize that I was worthy of love, not just the love I thought I deserved, but the kind of love that nurtures, heals, and grows. And with James, I knew that I had found that love. As I sit here, Telling you my story, I can't help but feel immense gratitude. The journey wasn't easy, but it led me to exactly where I was meant to be. And for that, I will forever be thankful.